Hello, and thanks for checking in. As I'm checking in, giving you a little bit of a progress update, sharing some more information, and asking another question of you. As we continue my journey writing my next paranormal book, which, if you missed part one, check it out. There's going to be a link in the description. But in essence, it is an autobiographical look through my paranormal life, if that makes any sense. Today, I'm going to get into a lot of details specifically about what the book is about. But before I do that, unfortunately, some somber news. I want to give a shout out in remembrance to two people that were important to the paranormal community. A lot of you, if you are somebody that has gone out to paranormal conferences, you know Scott Grenwald. Very, very fun person up from the Fresno area in California, but I think I first met him probably in Chicago. He came to a lot of different conferences. I bumped into him in a number of places, and he was one of those guys that made what we do fun. And he brought the silly, he brought the fun. He was a clown, and I would say that with reverence, and I think he would say that too, because he was silly, and it was okay to be silly. And so he's definitely absolutely going to be missed, and that was such a shock. I know he was sick and in the hospital, but I didn't have any idea personally that he was doing so poorly. And also a friend, not somebody that most of you would know, but Linda Considine. She was an early supporter of mine personally, and somebody that when I got into the paranormal, she was so excited because then she could talk to me about ghost stories, and I would go to her house in Illinois and we would tell stories and just banter back and forth. And she was always a big supporter. And any of us who are in an artistic field, we need those people in our lives to keep us moving forward. Those people who we feel they have our backs, because it's a tough field. We're doing so much on the speculation that people will care, that what we do will find a home. And she was somebody that I always knew when I wrote something or I put something out there that if she saw it, she would enjoy it and want to talk about it. So she will be missed. Two people that are important in different ways to the paranormal community. And I've thought this a lot. I don't know if I've really talked about it much, but that's one of the huge blessings. One of the great things about being in this field of making things publicly and being able to share them is that we're able to publicly thank people. And that's certainly something that is going to be a part of this book, giving credit to all of those people, because nobody succeeds in a vacuum, no matter what you do. But at least if you're a filmmaker, you have the special thanks at the end of the credits and the speeches. Hopefully you get to give one day where you get to shout people out. I know not every field, it doesn't work so much, and books have acknowledgments. And for me, within the text, I always love just giving someone credit right there in the moment, and not just giving credit, just citing your source, but saying that, hey, so-and-so wrote an amazing book and this is where this is from, going a little bit above and beyond, because yeah, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. And fortunately in this field, we get to actually know a lot of those giants that we surround ourselves with. I'm going to reveal the title today of the book, which is a good thing. And I'll be able to give somebody credit on that one as well, because that was a suggestion from someone else. And I'm going to go through the outline of the book, which is not going to be totally locked in. As you'll see, there's still some wiggle room here or there. But before I get into it, I've never utilized a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, anything like that. I've never utilized crowdfunding. And that's not something that I need to do for this particularly. I mean, maybe a little extra finances right up front might help me be able to do something a little bit extra special. I don't know. And what would that be? I don't know that either. But the point of it really would be about helping get the word out. It'd be more marketing than anything else, and making pre-sales easy. Because I wouldn't really want to be profiting off of this. I just want to be able to get the word out. And yeah, some upfront money is never a bad thing when I'm going to be talking about, printing physical books and shipping. So I just wanted to know what you think. Anybody out there, have you tried it? Do you think it's a good idea? Is it worth the hassle? Because I know it takes a lot to run a campaign successfully, a Kickstarter campaign. And I don't want to get bogged down in having a whole bunch of different keychains made and shipping out these little knickknacks to try to encourage people to give $5 more. Because that's not what it's about. I'm not trying to open a merch store, and I'm not trying to really raise a ton of money. Really, it's about getting those pre-sales lined up and getting the word out there to maybe people that wouldn't otherwise know about it. So if you have any opinion, if you have any firsthand experience too, let me know. Again, I'm trying to keep this a very open dialogue as I go on this creative journey. And really quick, before I get into that, keep checking out this channel right here because we have a lot going on. We've already had a lot of videos come out in the last couple of days. And tomorrow we're going to have a live chat with Rita Moore, who is a Lake Geneva haunted tour guide. And there might be some Lake Geneva in the book. We have to find out together as we check out our outline. Before we do, though, did want to raise a toast to Scott and Linda as we have some apple cider, got some of the Halloween decorations up. Who else is excited about October? All right, so first and foremost, the title of the book, and I have to give credit to Esther Goodstein, who is an independent film producer. She's done all sorts of different genres, but she's maybe mostly known for horror. But again, she's played in all different fields, television and film. She's a very, very, very busy filmmaker and producer. And, she said to me a while ago that my website, which is whatsyourghoststory.com, is a great title in and of itself, because every adventure I go on, everything I do, it starts with asking that question, what's your ghost story? That is one of my goals too, is to open dialogue with people and to have people comment on other people's stories and to build a community. So what's your ghost story? .com is the website, but the full story, the full name of the book, as we'll see right here. What's your ghost story? 25 years of collecting ghost stories and visiting odd places. There might be a little polish there, so that might not be totally locked in, but that'll be the essence, the ballpark of it all. And yes, this is looking back at 25 years of working in this field of collecting strange stories and sharing them and researching and researching and researching. So what would make sense? 25 years, probably 25 stories, my top 25 greatest hits. So far I've got my chapter count to about 63. So yes, that was a good idea. Doesn't work for me in what I want to do. And the idea of interweaving ghost stories and autobiographical tilt is maybe confusing, but hopefully if I go through this outline, which is also the table of contents, it will make some sense. When I wrote the introduction to the book, and that'll be a question too, who should write the foreword? I've had a lot of people in mind, but I haven't reached out to anybody yet. So if anybody has suggestions or who they would like to see write the intro, the foreword to my book, do let me know. But when I was writing my intro, a line that came up as I was writing, just kind of letting it flow, was, to know me, you need to know my ghost stories. And I think there's a lot to that, because, to really know me, you got to know what I've been through, where I've been, the types of things I've covered. It has a ring to it. And I think I'm kind of hanging my hat on that idea. Starting off with Resurrection Mary, because that's where it really started for me, was learning her story and going out and checking it out. It was the beginning of the Voices from the Grave documentary that I did back in 1999. And so we'll cover Resurrection Mary first, and I'll get a little bit in. I'll give you a little teaser of how the book opens too, with Resurrection Mary. But Archerwood Cemetery and Sunnybrook Asylum are such huge moments within that documentary that I'll cover them there. So you see in bold, those are almost the personal stories. So I'll be talking about what it's like to make a paranormal documentary, but then I'll be able to get into some of the ghost stories on top of it. So you're getting the production behind the scenes, shooting a documentary, and hey, while we're here, here's the story of Archerwood Cemetery and what it was like for us to go and film there and get, just about arrested by police there. Hauntings at my house and around the neighborhood while we were shooting the documentary, launching the website and talking about the gate. The gate in Libertyville is the cover image of the book, Voices from the Chicago Grave. Actually, it was the cover on the second edition. A lot was learned about that location through the website. So we kind of get into that. And again, kind of behind the scenes of how the website worked, and also then telling the story of the gate, which is a tremendous one. Same is very, very true of the House on Rainbow Road. And if you haven't seen it yet, NPR Chicago did a story on the House on Rainbow Road, including a lot of my research from the book, and I was interviewed on it. I'll make sure I put the link to that in the description because it's a very, very well done piece. And then writing Voices from the Chicago Grave, which of course was my book. The first edition of my book came out in 2000, I believe. The Lincoln Park Totem Pole was just a great behind the scenes type story of covering that location during an absolute blizzard and making some terrible decisions that worked out just fine. So it should hopefully make for some good reading. And also Barrett College in Lake Forest. It's a place that's always close to my heart because I had such an interesting time and fun time covering that location, interviewing students when I was still a college student as well. Of course, that building is gone now. There's not very much left to see, so I want to help it live on. The Stickney Mansion, I'm not sure if that's going to really go here, but that's a very important story within the book. But, we're still, again, roughing it in. Where exactly will that go? Irish Legend, which is down on Archer Avenue, right across from the Willowbrook Ballroom. And then, of course, the release of my book. And then that will open the door to meeting a certain archaeologist and having a ton of experiences, not paranormal, a ton of experiences involving Robinson Woods and Chief Alexander Robinson. Really, that could be its own book entirely. So I'm going to have to really fight over writing because there's a lot to talk about right there. But anyway, what's the best thing to do when you have a new book out? Leave the state entirely, which is what I did. I moved to Hawaii right outside of college and really learned quickly that I had moved to a different culture. I mean, quite honestly, it's a different culture. It's a different outlook on spirituality and ghosts, the paranormal. So I'm going to talk about Kaina Point, the Xerox building in Waikiki, and Night Marchers, a very unique local legend, famous legend. I shouldn't go as deep into detail as I want to talk about. I got to keep things moving along. Plus, it'll be in the book. The Mothership Connection was then a radio show I did with the wonderful, the talented, the comedic Dobie Maxwell. And that ended up opening doors to other things, heading out to Sedona, Arizona, including heading to Sedona on December 21st, 2012, when a lot of people thought the world was going to end and that something extra amazing and fantastical was supposed to happen in Sedona. So I went to check it out. Then also my first ever paranormal investigation, Antioch Tattoo Shop, which is a tattoo parlor, which I think is not there anymore, but it was my first ever paranormal investigation with Bob Jensen. So shout out to him. Investigating the Tribune Tower with Patty Vasquez. That was, so the Antioch Tattoo investigation was tied to 95 Will Rock, and the Tribune Tower is WGN radio. And then starting to give the Lake County Ghost Tour. And of course, any chance I can talk about the Mineola Resort is an opportunity I'm going to take. An amazing building, insanely deep history, and very, very, very endangered. I can't believe it's still standing. Last I looked, it was still standing, but it's slated for demolition. So if anybody wants to take a last look, do that. So I'm already seeing a miss on my part, which is that at some point in here, I have to talk about the re-release of my book. Because I independently wrote it, and then a publisher picked it up and we put it out. We expanded it by about 100 pages, and it was a chaotic experience. And that's not in here. That needs to be in here because that's part of the autobiographical portion. And right off the top of my head, I think I would talk about Bohemian National Cemetery, which is something that I covered a lot more for the book, the second edition. And it's just such an amazing place in general that I wanted in my book. So I'll put it in there. So again, we are going from 60 something to even more if you count the numbers and the dots here as different chapters or different sections of the book. Anyway, eventually moving to Los Angeles. So the book would have been right before I moved to LA. Because again, I write a book and I get out of town. I don't know why. I'm just terrible at marketing. But yeah, I moved to LA, and one of my first gigs I ever got, I was working on a shoot that was at Linda Vista Hospital, which became one of the most haunted buildings I ever set foot inside, probably the most haunted. While out there, going up to Napa with Max Tim and investigating a story about the Napa Rebobs, which is such a weird cryptid tale. It's one of my favorites, and they ended up adapting our YouTube video into an episode of Monsters and Mysteries in America. Launching the YouTube channel. Obviously, I cover a ton of locations on my YouTube channel, but a handful that I might highlight, maybe because it was a fun video to make, maybe because there was interesting interaction with the audience. Santa Barbara Mission, Shadow Park Ranch, also in, I think that's West Hills, California, the Pasadena Suicide Bridge, the Hollywood Sign, Bunnyman Bridge in Fairfax Station, Virginia. Paranormal TV was it's still an ongoing thing, but I was asked to pitch shows for like 3 or 4 years in a row. And most of the time those shows got optioned. And then there's a whole big journey of what happens next. And obviously I'm not on TV, so they didn't go to air, but I got different depths each time. and including being a cast member on other people's shows. I hope it's interesting even for the fan of paranormal TV or television in general, just to see what the process is like from behind the scenes. Also, so Mission San Miguel the Archangel in San Miguel, California, that and Murphy's Ranch for that matter, which is a old compound that was used by the Silver Shirt Legion. Again, I'm going into too much detail here, but basically Nazi sympathizers. We covered those locations on Mysteries at the Museum, a couple other locations too, but I worked on that show for a year. Oh my gosh. And then the Crosse Drownings documentary. Talk about one chapter that could rightly be a big, long, full book on its own. That's going to be huge. It's going to be another one that'll be difficult to pare down because that was a documentary. Shout out Jay Bachochin and Jackie Moran, and of course, Neil Sanders, who's no longer with us. Shout out and celebrate these people that impact our lives. This was a several year process of flying out from LA to La Crosse to cover a paranormal investigation into an active crime scene of sorts, a place with mysterious ongoing deaths. So obviously that's a huge part of my paranormal life. So that'll obviously get into the story in detail, but also the behind the scenes of making that documentary, the difficulties of it, because it was not an easy one, which is probably why I haven't done a documentary since, except for these small YouTube ones that it's a lot lighter, a lot more easy to do. And then of course, knowing Jay, he got really into Bigfoot hunting, and he took me on one of the weirdest experiences of my life, which is looking for Bigfoot in Kettle Moraine. There are some things that I think just chronologically, this is where they fit, although they're not really attached to a life moment or anything like that. But going to Gettysburg for the first time and having a tremendous experience at the Battle of Pickett's Charge, or the site of Pickett's Charge, moving into a haunted house in Los Angeles, which is right near where the Black Dahlia's body was found. So we'll talk about the Black Dahlia story as well. She's not at all associated with the house, but man alive, the house had enough going on. And talking about apports, which is one of my favorite paranormal phenomena, objects that just disappear from one location and reappear somewhere totally weird later. We had some of that at the house, and connecting that with the Hollymont house, which is a place that we talked about that's important to the ghost tour. And here we segue into talking about the first LA Hauntings ghost tour, Formosa Cafe, Cecil Hotel, Hollywood Tower, and Shadow People. Man, oh man, there's a lot right there. We did a special one-off one day. It was 3 tours, I think, in one day, really led by the great Richard Carradine. So absolute shout out to him for putting this together. I was there to help, basically, because he was just so amazing. But the Harry Houdini tour that we did one day. And talking about that, we can talk about the Knickerbocker Hotel, the first spiritual temple in LA. One of my favorite ghost stories comes out of that. Laurel Canyon in general. And there are kids like screaming like they're being butchered behind me. So that's a good vibe. I don't know if anybody can hear that. I didn't do it. Timestamp 8:34 as I'm recording this. I'm accounted for. And of course, then not associated with Houdini, Manson murder locations. Yeah, I won't go into detail there. Working with the ISA has let me travel across the country at different film festivals, including going to Tribeca. And yeah, I was insanely busy while I was out there, but it happened to be in the portion of Manhattan where the James Hotel is, where the Chelsea Hotel was, and where a lot of Ghostbusters was shot. So some of those places I didn't even try to go to. I mean, the James Hotel is part of the function itself, and that has an interesting, fascinating history, including ghost stories. Chelsea Hotel, one I did make sure I went to on my own and had some wild had a not a paranormal, but still a weird experience talking to residents of that hotel. And there's a new documentary out on the Chelsea that I need to watch before I write this. Also, at one point around this time period, I headed out to Yuma Territorial Prison. Incredible location, which we just went to again with Max Tim on a road trip, which is covered in a video I just put out last week, the road trip through Roswell video. And then finally, getting to paranormal conventions. At this point, I had gone to the Chicago Paracon a number of times, but pretty quickly I started going to a whole bunch of different ones and appearing at them, in some cases appearing at them, in some cases just attending. But Midsummer Scream and Scare LA, the first ever Chicago Paracon was at the Congress Hotel, which has its own ghost stories there. And I shouldn't say the last one, but one of the last ones was at the Willowbrook, and that was right before it burned down. Michigan Paracon, an amazing location, amazing event. It's just the scale of it is ginormous. And of course, Galena, one of my favorites, maybe my favorite. I'm not going to play favorites, but Galena is such a great convention that if you can get tickets to it, they are limited, but absolutely worth it. And then I want to use that to segue into talking about investigations I've done in Galena with Ted and Robin, who are the dynamic duo that runs the Galena Paracon. And I'll talk about the Dowling House a little bit there. Coming to Madison, which is where I live now, the first haunted location I went to was Sanatorium Hill, which is a wild location. I always boast about it, that people need to come and check this place out. It's got a lot of different claims, and it's on public ground, so you are able to go, and I really encourage ghost hunters, paranormal investigators to check it out. On a very different scale, the Sensabaugh Tunnel, which is down in eastern Tennessee. I'm trying to remember the name of the town, but it's not coming to me right now. Ghost hunting with a rock band. Maybe that should have come a little bit earlier. But Lake Geneva, here we go. Maxwell Mansion, shot a music video there, shot music videos at Greene County Asylum. Headed down to Chattanooga to cover Old South Pittsburgh Hospital, which shot a video there as well. And stayed at Hales Bar Dam. I actually stayed at the floating cabins off Hales Bar Dam. And I want this book in some ways to feel like a bit of a travel log or a travel advisory suggestions. Because if you head through Chattanooga at all, you have to stay at the floating cabins. And I want to put interesting tips out there for anybody interested. If anybody finds themselves in any of these locations. The Brumder Mansion, this will be a paranormal investigation chapter. It was the first time I ever did the Estes method. Heading down to Austin, Texas, with the ISA and Sunspot for that matter. But Cedar Oaks is another location that I think is underrated. And I love covering places that aren't insanely famous. Places I like shining a light on places that deserve more attention. And Cedar Oaks is definitely one of those places. Heading out to Baltimore to visit some Edgar Allan Poe and Ouija locations. Gore Orphanage on the way, that's up in near Sandusky, Ohio. Again, one of my favorite. All of these are like, oh yeah, this is another one of my favorite stories. If you've done this for long enough, you've been to a lot of places that are your favorites. Oh gosh, here's one of my very favorite places: the Mission Inn in Riverside, California, and the nearby hike, which is also haunted. And then just full stop Mothman. There's so much to go into there, but visiting the Mothman sites and Topeka. Here's one gets a lot of attention: Mothman. And one that should get a lot of attention, Topeka. There's some weird stuff in Topeka, Kansas, including Truck Hinge and Stull. Moving along, just because I want to keep going. Pembine up in northern Wisconsin. They call it the Four Seasons, but it was called that well before the Four Seasons that we all know, that chain. So it's not part of that Four Seasons, but an insane resort with a mafia history. And lots of intrigue, and a place where, they're very open about the paranormal and their place being haunted. And speaking of which, the Queen Mary. So we will talk about that. This one should be bold because this is more autobiographical again, but surviving the pandemic, one ghost story at a time. I did a series of 26 live storytelling sessions while we were in lockdown, 1 week for half a year. Shout out to Amelia Cotter, who was also doing storytelling sessions at that time. And just the different ways that we tried to, a lot of us tried to entertain people while we were sheltering in place at home. But yeah, some stories came out of it, and speeches came out of it, and ideas for books came out of it. So we do get into, obviously I'm going to be telling ghost stories through all this, but it opens itself up to creativity and brainstorming that came out of it as well. So I'm going to talk about a couple of episodes that became their own full hour and a half long speeches, including talking about window areas and some of the locations listed there. And in the midst of that, actually, Fantastic Story Society should go first. That's here. That should also be bold because autobiographical. That's the podcast I do with Max Tim, where we interview storytellers of all different kind, and we get them to tell their own ghost stories, even if they're not ghost story people, but just anybody that has a really wild story to talk about. FSS is Fantastic Story Society. find it anywhere. And we are just about to kick off season 5 with Rita Mae Moore talking about haunted Lake Geneva. In the process of creating or shooting or making the Fantastic Story Society, we've done a handful of live events where we do a live investigation. I mean, it's recorded, but we're there and we don't know what's going to happen. We interview people on site, and the great Madison tour guide, Lisa Van Buskirk, she takes us through these haunted places so far around Madison, but we're looking to branch out to some other locations soon. But the Tempest is an incredible restaurant if anybody wants some good seafood. But then also the Masonic Temple, which that's an episode that I am so far overdue in making. I've worked on it for hours and hours and hours, but there's still so much to do because this is an occasion where you are shooting an episode of a podcast, which takes time in and of itself. But then there's also a paranormal investigation as part of it. So you're also going through all of the footage that is just never ending, all the different recorders that you have to go through. And we're trying to make a video version of it too. So double editing, and it's just such a big it's such a big ordeal. It's going to be worth it because it was such a fun night and we did have activity happen. LA Hauntings, the tour, part 2, because thanks to American Ghost Walks, we have relaunched it, and we'll talk about the Roosevelt Hotel, probably some other LA locations. Don't exactly know. Again, a lot of this is rough, but just below that, haunted filming locations. This is a series I'm doing here on YouTube. I launched it about almost a year ago, where I kind of combine the two things I love, which is film production and ghost stories and history, I guess. And I talk about a haunted location and then dive into what has been shot there and what the true history of the place is. And hopefully it's light and entertaining and fun. That's really the goal of it. And I just love juxtaposing the most macabre real life history with silly stuff that has shot there. For example, the Suicide Bridge is where just about everybody has done a bungee jump scene. Yes Man is what I always mention because Jim Carrey did it. But also Scrubs did a bungee jump scene from it, and Full House did. So like, again, all of these silly shows or movies, and this is where literally 90, maybe probably 100 people by now have committed suicide, and we're shooting sitcoms. So that's I don't know why I'm morbidly fascinated by that. And then, yeah, going back to a speech topic, I think the best speech I ever gave was at the Galena Paracon a couple of years ago. It's my favorite one, at least. It's the positive side of the paranormal. It kind of wraps it up. Like, why do we do this? Why do I do this? This weird thing that I know a lot of people don't understand because it seems weird or strange or macabre. And my family has to deal with the fact that the neighbors are whispering because they got the weirdo kid, So, and to me, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's loving the mystery in life and in this world we live in, appreciating the world around us, appreciating the history that got us where we are. That's a tiny piece of it. And I did mention that I would give you a small sample of the very beginning of the book, the beginning of the real text, past the foreword, past the intro, and that is a couple of paragraphs on Resurrection Mary. So again, I want to try to. There's not much humor in this part, but I want to take people on a journey, have more emotion in my writing than I did in the past, which I thought was very much history book like. It was trying to get through so many facts, trying to get them all in and get them all right, that I didn't think I had enough. I didn't give myself enough room to breathe and be creative and have fun with writing. So I'm doing that this time. And so here's the beginning of my chapter on Resurrection Mary. I knew without a doubt what I would do if I happened to come in contact with Chicago's most famous ghost. If I had the luck to have a brief encounter with Resurrection Mary, I would simply ask, "What's your name?" and pray that I got an answer. Some people have been able to spend the entire night dancing with her. I should be able to get one question in, right? Well, that's the difference between having a plan and executing a plan, especially when it comes to paranormal encounters. Like a lightning strike, they come without warning, catching you off guard. Even if you have a plan, you don't know how you're going to react in the moment. When all is said and done, I don't really know if I encountered the one and only Resurrection Mary or just witnessed some other unexplainable event. All I do know is that I momentarily lost my mind in fear. That game plan was out the window in a hurry. Hopefully that keeps you wanting to hear, wait, what happened? What's next? I'm sharing my creative journey with all of you in case anybody wants to participate in any way. I'm not really looking for stories, but if you have an experience at one of these places, I do, of course, I'd love to hear that. It's not necessarily meaning I'm looking for content for the book. I have 25 years of being a weirdo on location. So it's really about if you see something that, oh, what if you tried to do this? Or here's an idea, just throw things at me. Like, I don't know what the cover is going to be yet. I'm covering a ton of locations. I don't really want to have a big picture of me on it. Uh, Although I suppose I should be somewhere on that because it is my autobiography in some ways. This mug ain't gonna move copies, but if there's some interesting way that even I could make peace with it, I'll do it. I didn't even put my author's photo in my first book. So anyway, if anybody has any ideas about any aspect of the book, um, and any insight, if you ever self-published on your own, I did it 20 years ago, and a lot's changed. We had bookstores back then. By all means, I am all ears, humbly coming to you. If you feel like sharing any ideas, I do have to say, as I said, I had 60 some odd locations listed. I haven't found a place for a handful of other locations that I know I'm going to write about. So this is definitely going to continue to grow, uh, maybe quite a bit. And there's a real good chance that this will be a Kill Bill type situation where we will do a volume 1, volume 2. So we'll just see how it pans out. Anyway, thank you all for watching. This has been a longer video than it needed to be. And I hope to see you all very soon. Thanks for watching. And I do still want to know, what's your ghost story?